Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. In Kabul, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin has met Afghan President Ashraf Ghani during a surprise visit ahead of a troops withdrawal deadline agreed with the Taliban. According to a presidential palace statement, they discussed the peace process and expressed concern over rising violence in the country. Speaking to reporters on board the plane before his arrival, Austin said the withdrawal of troops hinges on the level of violence. In Syria, at least 7 people have been killed and 10 wounded in an attack by Damascus-backed forces on a hospital in Idlib. In a tweet, the Turkish Defense Ministry said a child was among those killed. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei has made it clear that his country will comply with the nuclear deal once U.S. sanctions are lifted. In a televised speech to mark Iran's New Year, Khamenei said U.S. promises have no credibility for Tehran. He called for a mass turnout in the upcoming polls to defend Iran's sovereignty as the country battles the coronavirus pandemic and biting sanctions. In Myanmar, a peaceful march by medical professionals in the second biggest city kicked off another day of protests around the country against last month's coup. Security forces shot dead at least one person at a rally elsewhere. More than 270 people have been killed since the military toppled the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. India has reported this year's highest daily deaths from COVID-19 and infections. The Indian Health Ministry says 197 people have died and nearly 44,000 tested positive in a day. In Pakistan, over 3,600 people tested positive and 44 died overnight as the fatalities tally topped 13,800. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.7 million lives and infected more than 122 million people so far. And in football, Chelsea have moved into the FA Cup semi-finals after beating Sheffield United 2-0 at home. An own goal gave the Blues the lead before Hakim Ziyech doubled it in the final moments of the game. The semi-final draw will be announced later. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now for the news in more detail. We begin in Kabul, where the Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin has met Afghan President Ashraf Ghani during a surprise visit to Kabul. According to a presidential palace statement, they discussed the peace process and expressed concern over rising violence in the country. The visit comes at a crucial time when the U.S. is reviewing last year's deal struck with the Taliban to end decades of war in Afghanistan. Under the agreement, the U.S. is due to pull out its troops from Afghanistan by the 1st of May. But violence continues to rage in Afghanistan, and U.S. President Joe Biden said earlier this week that it's tough to meet the deadline. Responding, the Taliban said there would be consequences if Washington does not stick to the agreed timetable. Meanwhile, in Myanmar, a peaceful march by medical professionals in the second biggest city kicked off another day of protests around the country against last month's coup. Security forces shot dead at least one person at a rally elsewhere. More than 270 people have been killed since the military toppled the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. This report has the details.
With public protests getting ever more dangerous, anti-coup demonstrators in Myanmar's Mandalay acted early to minimize the risk of confrontation with security forces. About 100 doctors, nurses, medical students, and pharmacists lined up on the city's main road to proclaim their opposition to the February 1st coup. The city has been a major center of opposition to the takeover, but in recent weeks, the numbers of protesters have fallen off in the face of lethal use of force by police and soldiers firing live ammunition into crowds. The army takeover reversed the slow progress towards democracy, which began when Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party won a 2015 election after 5 decades of military rule. The coup has prompted sanctions from the international community and the calls to release elected leaders.
In Syria, at least 7 people are killed, including a child, in an artillery attack by government forces on a hospital in northeast Idlib. Turkey's defense ministry says the shelling in the town of Al-Atarib wounded 10 others. The town falls within Idlib's de-escalation zone. The area has been subject of multiple ceasefire deals, which have frequently been violated by the Syrian government. And Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei has made it clear that his country will comply with the nuclear deal once U.S. sanctions are lifted. In a televised speech to mark Iran's New Year, Khamenei said U.S. promises have no credibility for Tehran. He said Tehran has achieved self-sufficiency despite maximum pressure policy by the U.S. to weaken the country. Khamenei also called for a mass turnout in the upcoming polls to defend Iran's sovereignty as the country battles the COVID-19 pandemic and biting sanctions. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led coalition says it has launched airstrikes on Houthis in Yemen's northern city of Marib. The move comes after a drone strike by Yemeni rebels set a Riyadh oil refinery ablaze on Friday. In a statement, the coalition said it has destroyed Houthi military equipment and inflicted heavy losses. It said the strikes halted a tank and infantry offensive by the Houthis in Marib. A Yemeni government official said the coalition had launched at least 20 strikes. He added at least 70 fighters and 22 government soldiers were killed and dozens injured in clashes during the past 48 hours. Over 1 million people have been displaced in the region since the renewed fighting erupted. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will annex parts of the occupied West Bank only if U.S. President Joe Biden supports it. In an interview, Netanyahu said he awaits Biden's approval, but he still intends to do it. During his election campaign, Biden had said he vehemently opposes any annexation plan. In July last year, Netanyahu announced an annexation plan under an agreement with his coalition partner Benny Gantz. However, the Israeli premier failed to implement the plan amid differences with partners and U.S. former administration. In Thailand's capital of Bangkok, more than 30 protesters and security personnel have been injured during anti-government protests. An emergency medical center says police used water cannons, tear gas, and rubber bullets to disperse the protesters. Protesters have been calling for the release of their leaders and for the reform of the monarchy. Police said they have arrested 20 people for breaking public gathering laws and insulting the monarchy. They said violence originated from the protesters' side and police have to defend the law and protect national treasures. This comes after Parliament failed to pass a bill to rewrite the military-backed constitution, which is one of the protesters' main demands. Iraq says the U.S.-led coalition forces have destroyed 85 ISIS targets in 133 strikes over the past 10 days. The defense ministry said the strikes hit 61 shelters and 24 caves used by the terrorists. The ministry added the coalition forces also neutralized a number of ISIS militants during the operations. Iraq declared victory over the terror group by reclaiming all of its territories in 2017. But ISIS still maintains sleeper cells in large areas of the country and periodically launches attacks. ISIS has claimed responsibility for an ambush last week that killed 33 Malian soldiers. 14 soldiers were wounded in Monday's attack in the Gao region near the border with Niger. According to Mali's army, the attack had also left 20 assailants dead. ISIS has claimed responsibility for previous attacks on either side of the border that have killed dozens of Malian and Nigerian soldiers. It also carried out the 2017 ambush in a Nigerian village that killed 4 American troops. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, voting has begun for the presidential election that is boycotted by the main opposition party. More than 2.5 million voters have registered to take part in the election. President Denis Sassou Nguesso is widely expected to extend his 36-year rule and secure his 4th term against the 6 opponents. According to Monitor NetBlocks, there is an internet blackout across the country. United Nations and European Union observers were not invited to monitor the election, and the Interior Ministry refused to allow the Catholic Church's 1,100 observers to take part. Results are expected to be published within 4 days of voting. Meanwhile, Mediterranean countries on the front line of Europe's migration crisis have called for more solidarity from EU governments. The interior and migration ministers of Greece, Italy, Spain, Cyprus, and Malta held a summit of Med5 in Athens. They said the pact on migration in its current form does not provide sufficient reassurances to the frontline member states. In a joint statement, they said 5 states cannot take all the pressure from the rest of the European Union. The ministers called for a centrally managed European returns mechanism and relocation of asylum seekers among all member states. EU's top migration official, Margarita Shinas, said it is time for European geography to reconcile with European solidarity.
We are here at the summit of the 5 southern European Mediterranean countries, who are forced by geography to carry a disproportionately large burden of the refugee crisis for all of Europe. We are at the point now where we must reconcile European geography with European solidarity.
And Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has told Russia to stop spying in his country. This comes a day after Bulgarian prosecutors said they had charged 6 people for working as spies for Moscow. They said the alleged spies passed classified information about Bulgaria, NATO, and the EU to the Russian embassy in Sofia. Prime Minister Borisov said it could again be necessary to declare Russian diplomats as unwanted. During a trip to the northeastern city of Silistra, Borisov said Sofia always demonstrated friendship. However, he added the Euro-Atlantic partnership cannot be jeopardized. Meanwhile, the Russian embassy in Sofia termed the allegations another attempt to demonize Russia. More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. Brazil has reported nearly 2,500 COVID-19 fatalities in a day, taking the country's death toll to almost 293,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.7 million lives and infected more than 122 million people so far. More on the pandemic in this report.
Anti-lockdown protests and concerns over vaccine safety have overwhelmed the governments as countries continue to register record deaths and cases. Peru's official death toll has crossed the grim milestone of 50,000 deaths, but health experts fear the true tally could be closer to 100,000. Chile also set a new daily record for COVID-19 cases, leaving its hospitals on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, the Brazilian government has been in talks with the US about potentially importing excess COVID-19 vaccines, and following the concerns, Colombia's President Ivan Duque has offered to receive the AstraZeneca vaccine to demonstrate its safety.
I say very clearly that if the fact that me receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine as President of the Republic will bring peace of mind about that vaccine, if you Health Minister Fernando Ruiz think it is useful, then I will do it when you tell me. Because that is the message for all Colombians, that all the vaccines which have been acquired are safe vaccines.
Over in Europe, Denmark has reported 2 cases of hospital staff with blood clots and cerebral hemorrhage after receiving the AstraZeneca. In Greece, the health experts say new admissions of patients to hospitals have increased to more than 500 a day as the country prepares to ease restrictions. The number of patients in French ICUs have also risen to this year's highest level, but anti-lockdown demonstrations continue in the region. In central London, police made 33 arrests after around 10,000 people gathered against restrictions. A similar demonstration in Germany turned violent as police deployed water cannons and used pepper spray to disperse crowds. But in Spain, a number of German tourists arrived in the island, providing a timely boost for one of the hardest-hit industries.
Wir sind unglaublich glücklich, heute die ersten.
We are extremely happy to be allowed to welcome approximately 220 guests today. Our occupancy rate is expected to increase in the coming days, and over Easter we expect a 75% occupancy rate. Most of our customers come from Germany, Austria and Switzerland.
In Africa, Congo's leading presidential opposition candidate, Guy Brice Parfait Kolelas, has been hospitalized for COVID-19 ahead of today's election. Meanwhile, Kenya's plans to offer free vaccines to all diplomats in the country has been met with criticism by local medics.
While in Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed another 44 lives overnight, pushing the death toll to 13,843. The health ministry says over 3,600 people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. More details in this report.
The ministry said caseload has reached nearly 627,000, while around 582,000 have recovered. It said the number of active cases has jumped to over 31,000, with nearly 3,000 patients in critical condition. President Arif Alvi has urged the nation to get vaccinated and be aware of skeptics. In a tweet, Alvi said inoculation is a must as it increases the survival rate and is 100% effective in most cases. Meanwhile, world leaders and diplomats have sent out wellness wishes to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. The Prime Minister and First Lady tested positive for COVID-19 on Saturday. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President of Maldives Ibrahim Mohammed Solih wished for Khan's speedy recovery. Palestinian ambassador, Australia's High Commissioner, and German envoy also sent their prayers. The U.S. Embassy and Chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation Afghanistan, Abdullah Abdullah, also hope that Khan recovers soon.
India's health ministry has warned that a huge gathering of devotees for a Hindu festival can send coronavirus cases surging. Today, the country reported this year's highest daily COVID-19 deaths and infections. The health ministry said 197 people died and nearly 44,000 tested positive overnight. It said up to 40 people are contracting the virus daily around the site of the Mahakumbh. The festival began this month and peaks in April near the Ganges in Uttarakhand. Organizers have said more than 150 million visitors are expected. The ministry said the state's daily coronavirus testing is not enough for the expected number of pilgrims. And Mashal Malik, the wife of detained Kashmiri politician Yasin Malik, has demanded justice for the victims of the Chittisingpura massacre. 35 Sikh villagers were shot dead by Indian troops in the Anantnag district of occupied Kashmir in 2000. The massacre coincided with the visit of the then U.S. President Bill Clinton to India. In a video message, Mashal Malik expressed solidarity with the victims. She said the family members of the victims have filed multiple petitions since then, but to no avail. And U.S. President Joe Biden has called Turkey's withdrawal from a global accord designed to protect women from violence deeply disappointing. In a statement, Joe Biden described it as a step backward in the efforts to end violence against women. He went on to say that countries must be working to strengthen their commitments to ending violence against women. On Saturday, Turkey pulled out of the Istanbul Convention, drawing protests from campaigners. Its family minister, Zehra Zumrud, said women's rights are protected by the Constitution, but did not give a reason for withdrawing from the convention. And EU Commissioner Mairead McGuinness says Northern Ireland is in a difficult situation as it deals with the consequences of Brexit. In an interview, she called on Britain and the bloc to reduce temperatures and find solutions as equal partners. Political tensions have risen in Northern Ireland, with the pro-British community unhappy about new barriers to trade with the rest of the UK. Northern Ireland has always been the toughest issue in the Brexit divorce. McGuinness said business knows no borders, adding that communities in Northern Ireland want a solution. Earlier, London cautioned the EU that tensions in Northern Ireland could undermine stability unless properly addressed. And in the U.S., hundreds of demonstrators have gathered across the country following this week's deadly shootings at spas in Atlanta, Georgia. More details in this report.
Anti-Asian hate crimes in the United States have surged since the pandemic began. On Thursday night, a 21-year-old white male attacked a spa, killing 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent. Rallies were held in many cities, including Atlanta, New York, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, San Antonio, and Chicago. Protesters demanded that the attack be formally identified as a hate crime.
We gotta call it for what it is, and what it is a hate crime. We don't need anyone to tell us that we don't know if it was racially motivated or not. We can see with our own eyes that this was a hate crime. And anyone who says otherwise is a coward and refuses to believe the truth.
Demonstrators held signs calling for an end to hatred against Asians. Addressing a rally, Georgia State Representative Bean Nguyen slammed the defining of the victims.
And now, in the wake of this brutal crime, they are daring to degrade the women who were killed. They were mothers. They were workers. They left grieving children behind. And the fact that it took law enforcement several days to even identify some of these women speaks to the vulnerability, the invisibility, and the isolation that some of these women had in their lives.
According to a report by rights group Stop AAPI Hate, nearly 3,800 Asian Americans were a victim of racially motivated attacks over the past year.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for a global fight against racism. In a tweet, the UN chief termed racism a deeply rooted global evil. Guterres said racism transcends generations and contaminates societies. The UN chief said racism perpetuates inequality, oppression, and marginalization. Guterres called on the international community to work together to eradicate racism so that all may live with peace, dignity, and opportunity.
I appeal to young people everywhere, as well as educators and leaders, to teach the world that all people are born equal. Supremacy is an evil lie. Racism kills. On this day and every day, let us work together to rid the world of the pernicious evil of racism, so all may live in a world of peace, dignity, and opportunity.
In Australia, heavy rains along the country's east coast have brought the worst flooding in half a century. The government has declared a natural disaster in large swathes of New South Wales. The floods have resulted in the closure of several major roads, forcing thousands of Australians to evacuate their houses. No deaths have been reported yet. However, emergency services say hundreds of houses have been damaged. Rains have been swamping various communities since Thursday, but parts of the East Coast tipped into a major crisis yesterday as a large dam overflowed, adding to swollen rivers and causing flash flooding. In Iceland, a volcano near the capital, Reykjavik, provides a spectacle as lava flows from a fissure in the earth. The 500 to 750-meter-long fissure at the eruption site is spewing lava fountains up to 100 meters high. Authorities said the eruption posed no immediate danger to people or critical infrastructure. The volcano erupted on Friday after thousands of small earthquakes in recent weeks. The last eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula was some 900 years ago. Iceland has also recorded more than 40,000 earthquakes in the past 3 weeks. And a meteor lit up the sky over eastern Cuba as it streaked over and crashed, causing an explosion. The National Seismological Service says the phenomenon was witnessed in the towns of Moa, Sagua de Tanamo, and Maisi. They said there are no reports of any damage or injury. Earlier this month, a meteor also lit up the sky over parts of Britain like a fireball. The video shows the space rock burning brightly as it streaks through the sky and falls to the ground in southwestern England. And the International Space Station crew ISS-65 have taken their final pre-launch exams at Star City in the Moscow region. The crew of the Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft includes 2 Russian cosmonauts and a NASA astronaut. Similarly, 2 Russian cosmonauts and NASA astronaut Anne McClain will be their backup. The spaceflight is scheduled for the 9th of April from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. According to the Russian Space Agency, the planned flight's duration will be 191 days. American astronaut McClain says she is ecstatic to join the team.
I'm very lucky to be the backup crew. Got assigned with a very experienced crew members, and I think training for this flight after already having flown once has been very different. It's been very good working with these professionals, and so very happy to be out of that.
In Colombia, a zoo has enlisted a pianist to help soothe its animals with some of the world's most famous classical compositions. Do animals enjoy music as much as humans do? Well, this report has the details.
German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, "Without music, life would be a mistake." It seems like this quote is not applicable to only humans. Since virtually everything has its sound, music is present in nature. It also has different physiological effects on animals. Officials at Colombia's Cali Zoo say new sensory experience is having a calming effect on animals as diverse as zebras, loins, and ostriches.
Many of the activities that enrich sound and senses are very beneficial to animals, of course under controlled conditions, and always for their welfare and tranquility.
Interest in the use of music therapy as a behavioral enrichment tool in veterinary medicine is growing. Various researchers indicate that animals appear less stressed or anxious when exposed to classical music than to controlled conditions. Pianist Mario Fernando Prado is very happy to be a part of it.
I feel happy. I feel content. I think playing for an animal is something that is very interesting. I have never played for, well, yes, I have played for many animals, but the 2-legged kind.
The administration of Cali Zoo is hopeful that their debut pianist will pave the way for other musical acts to entertain their wild animals.
We'll be back after a short break. Stay with us. On to the latest in business. The International Monetary Fund has pointed to emerging signs of a stronger global economic recovery, but it has warned that significant risks remain, including the emergence of coronavirus mutations. IMF's Deputy Managing Director Jeffrey Okamoto said the fund will update its earlier forecast of 5.5% global growth in April. In a speech to the China Development Forum, Okamoto said China had already recovered to pre-pandemic growth levels. He raised concerns of widening gap between advanced economies and emerging markets outside of China. Okamoto added the overall outlook remained exceptionally uncertain as it is unclear how long the pandemic will last. And the oil giant Saudi Aramco has announced that its profits fell sharply last year as lockdowns around the world curbed demand for oil. Earnings in 2020 fell by nearly 45% compared with 2019, but Saudi Aramco still made a profit of $49 billion and said shareholders will receive dividends totaling $75 billion. Over the course of last year, the price of oil fell by a fifth as countries halted travel. Moreover, shutting down of industries and curbs to many day-to-day activities reduced demand for energy and fuel. The oil price has recovered slightly since December as the vaccine rollout gets underway. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.